All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Panelists, please have a seat. I thought we would have an hour and a half to do this. I found out we only have 30 minutes. So I'm not going to do long introductions, and I'll try and limit myself to only 15 minutes of the 30 minutes and then give everyone a chance to breathe. My name is Mosharraf, and you can look me up. That's Naif, that's Carl, this is Abdulaziz, and this is Philipp. This is the panel on enabling transformation. So what we're going to try and do is have a quick conversation about this whole idea of transformation. Before we begin, I just want to say my personal congratulations to the organizers. I've found every session today to be so perfectly in tune with this idea of generation transformation. This is the very highest level of curation, having done Davos many times, having done all kinds of other conferences all around the world. This is really fantastic. So a round of applause to the MGF and to the great Saudi spirit, especially the spirit of the youth. Philipp, one of the spirits of the youth that I get when I come to Riyadh, and this is my first trip to Riyadh, even the hotel and even this venue, like I went to the bathroom and everything was gold and I was like, wow, subhanAllah, this opulence. And I want to be a part of this, right? I was thinking, you know what, I'd love to be driving a Bentley pretty soon. That's the transformation I want. And then I thought, well, I want the same for all my Saudi brothers and sisters and my German and Swedish and everybody else too. How do we get from where we are to a place of opulence where everybody can drive a Bentley? That's truly the transformation we want, isn't it?
Very
Philipp.
well.
Yeah, stand up, do your thing.
I will. I'd like to ask all of you a quick favor. I'd like you to wonder about the ways in which all of this today is transforming you. And as you ponder about that, I'm also going to offer you a little idea to potentially implant in your consciousness for some time. This idea is that transformation fundamentally, quintessentially, is like growing a garden in the desert. There is this beautiful garden of trees, lush foliage, fragrant blossoms, and delicious ripe fruit. All of this is the reason why we change, the result, the collective societal outcome. That is representing the us. Then, supported by this, we find an intricate, interwoven labyrinth of branches, of trunks, potentially even of stems. This represents the us. It represents all of that which enables this wonderful splendor. And this us is, of course, the sense of community. It's the sense of we. But perhaps by now you'll have realized that there is something else that is at the source of all of this, which is beneath the surface, where we find our roots and where we find our ground and our common ground. And so as we drill deeper and deeper here, eventually we hit a well. And this becomes our well and our source. That represents the individuality of potential. It represents the me in all of us. And from there on, we grow and we express in the sense of community, the we. And that allows us to build this wonderful sense of us, of shared purpose. And so as we ponder that, I'd like to believe that all of us can genuinely be part of humanizing the future and to bring our own humanity to that pursuit. And as a result of us building all of this, we harvest a much more wonderful future. Or in other words, to feel a profound sense of empowerment, to hear the reassuring hum of a thriving community, and to envision the beauty of what can be.
All right, so that basically just inspires us and tells us it is possible, but you haven't given us a formula. I'm going to come back to you on the formula. Abdulaziz, no offense, because you look younger than I am, but I know how old you are.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, you do, for sure. But I know how old you are. And I've been going around. Alhamdulillah, I was in Mecca. I got to perform the Umrah. Then I went to Medina, went to the Rawda, alhamdulillah. Thank you to the Saudi people and to the Khadimain for the hospitality and everything. But I've tried to talk to Saudis everywhere. I was in Jeddah, I was in Dammam yesterday, and here I am. And of course, I'm not that confident generally, so I tend to be drawn to people my age. So I've been talking to a lot of Gen X Saudis. And I have a thesis, which is, and I want to test that with you. We've seen in this country in the last 5-10 years really rapid change. I first came to Saudi in '99, and between then and now, wow, like it's unbelievable, like the last 5 years especially, right? And so I'm just wondering, you have a millennial prime minister, the crown prince, who's much younger than we are, and clearly smarter and has tons more energy. And it seems like he's connected with his generation and with Gen Z. That's what generation transformation is about. And I'm worried about Gen X, not just in Saudi, but I'm really worried about myself globally as well. Are we going to get left behind? Like, how does Gen X fit into this grand transformation?
Well, I think that probably it's a mindset that we need to be careful on making sure that we're not creating this kind of optics of a generational war between Gen X and Gen Y. They're more complementary to each other. I talked to some of our colleagues in the past, and something kind of popped up, which is we sometimes, as a generation, my generation, are under the illusion that we're designing the future for the next generation. That's an illusion. The next generation is actually designing what's remaining of our future.
Yeah.
So it's important to all of us to remain relevant and really start to develop and sharpen those skills of explaining purpose and why, because we want to be relevant, we want to continue to be relevant, and we have the experience and we have the memory of where we came from. And we've been through transformations in the past in the kingdom. This is definitely much more aggressive, and on the corporate side and the corporate world, it's more evident. But it's always about creating that shared need, as you've mentioned, Philip, sometime. It's purpose, it's the ability of explaining the why. It's no longer a generation that would accept just doing jobs just because we're asking them to do them. This is a generation that requires ideas to be sold to them. This is a generation that would like to understand the why behind that. The question comes back to us, do we have the capability to do that? In the past, we come from a generation that when we were asked to do something, someone would say, jump. Yeah. Our response is, how high do you want me to jump? Yeah. Now try asking that question today. The immediate response is, why? Why do you want me to do that? So that capability of being able to explain the why is something that is becoming more important. It's almost a license to operate. And then on the corporate side, we need to start looking very quickly on how do we set up our operating models? What are the business models, the process models, the leadership models that we have? What would it take to create this two-way bridge that we talked about, Philip, an hour ago? Because it is a bridge, and it's complementary, and it's going to take both generations to do this. It's not going to be one, because the change is massive. The theme of what the whole globe is going through is agility. COVID-19 gave us quite good insight. It was kind of a trial of massive change and how humanity could react to that. And it was not a generational split. It was the whole population, the whole society. So our ability to move forward is our ability really to create this bridge between the two generations in order for us to achieve this agility.
In my country, Abdulaziz, the boomers haven't gotten out of the way yet. So even my generation, the Gen X, we're still waiting. And of course, Gen Y, millennials, Gen Z, everybody's kind of just, and things are not great, but they'll get better, inshallah. I'm very confident. And one of the reasons I'm confident is I get inspiration from what's happening over here. Do you feel like in this country, in your country, that bridge role that Gen X should play, is your generation being able to play that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I would attribute that to clarity on purpose, clarity on vision, the inclusiveness of people that are capable. It's not about the generation. People that understand the purpose, that are able to contribute, they're willing and have the energy and the stamina to deliver.
Fantastic.
It's inspirational.
No, that's fantastic. And I get that sense as well. So, maybe talking a little more specifically, Naif, one of the things that, again, we get sitting outside the kingdom is that there's a real focus of the kingdom and of the leadership in this country on digital transformation. And it's not just local. Many of you won't know this, but there's an organization called Digital Cooperation Organization where Saudi Arabia wants to actually lead a bunch of countries, and my country is one of the countries that signed up to it. Here locally, that role is being conducted by your organization, and you're part of the leadership team, Naif. Talk to us a little bit about how this transformation has been enacted, right? Like how, obviously you're doing this in Saudi Arabia, A, to take advantage of the youth bulge, because there is that youth bulge, but B, to empower and enable that youth bulge. So it's a kind of a yin-yang. How is Saudi Arabia doing it?
Mosharraf, just I want to assure you that you will not left anyone behind. So
Inshallah.
we will work together and we'll achieve it. In the beginning, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have gone through a massive change in the last couple of years. And I can say it's the biggest transformation program in the modern history. This transformation have been led by an inspiring leader. He ignited this whole transformation. He set the North Star very clear and wide. This is number one. This program have been developed in an agile way, so it can be adapted, it can be changed very quick. Also, it's governed in a way that drives results. And in the last couple of years, starting from 2017, several steps have been taken. A historical meeting between His Royal Highness and Mr. Swaha. We released a spectrum like never. We were not in the countries that in the list, and we are now second in G20. We connect more than 3 million houses with fiber optic. So our mission was to connect the unconnected. But not only that, also in the global arena, we are trying to be innovative when it comes to technology. So it's not about how we are connecting people. It's how technology are trying to make our life better. Before 1 week, space was added as a scope in our mandate. So we are not connecting people in land. We are connecting people also from the space to ensure that everyone have a better surface, better life, and we can bridge the digital gap.
That's Naif, that's at some level inspiring. I don't know what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not, but you mentioned backstage, we were talking a little bit about the kind of the moonshot and beyond that is being driven by the leadership in this country. Do you want to say a bit more about that, just so that people understand how grand that vision actually is? Because I don't know if all the Saudis here understand it or not, but I know that outside this country, people don't really get the scale of the vision.
In brief, maybe I'm not allowed to say everything.
Okay.
So I will try just to give a hint about something that have been announced. Yeah. So when we talk about the space, we launch the program lately. We will have one female and a male going to the space the first quarter, as was announced soon. It's not about going to the space alone. It's about the way forward. So why we are going there? We are going there because we want to ensure and inspire our new generation. We want to ignite our manufacturing system. We want to improve our R&D capability. So this is the way forward, and we're looking forward to see the details soon.
I think that's really profound, and that's why I pushed on that question, that when people hear the big kind of big ticket items, they think, that's like a vanity project. Well, no, it's not a vanity project, because actually it has upstream implications. If you're going to improve R&D, you're going to improve your education system. You're going to improve your schools. You're going to improve maternal and neonatal health because you want kids to come out of the womb with the cognitive abilities that they should rather than the ones that they don't. So there's a whole spectrum of sort of cradle to grave implications for some of these projects. Carl, as an economic historian, I want you to just talk a little bit maybe about how history views previous efforts at transformation at this pace. And maybe not just Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of transformation taking place all over the world. A lot of it isn't very good. Some of it is very exciting. There's huge demographic bulges in some countries, but you have countries like Germany, not to pick on Philipp, but where you don't have that demographic advantage. You have countries like Italy where the median age, I think, is above 50. So transformation is taking place across a whole range of things all over the world. How does history view how these transformations take place, and then maybe juxtapose what's happening here with history?
Periods of great transformation are very exciting times, but they are, needless to say, uncertain times. We just heard from a tennis star before this session. She would tell you that if you play at Wimbledon outdoors in very windy conditions, it really sets the best players apart from the rest. When things are uncertain, the high performers tend to do really well. The rest risks falling behind. And what transformation requires more than anything else is resilience. If we look at the financial crisis, for example, the firms and the organizations that survived were the ones that were the most resilient. Now ask yourself, what is it that makes you resilient? Well, first of all, in order to deal with uncertainty, in order to deal with rapid change, you need a great deal of skill, but also autonomy, right? In periods of rapid change, the rule book essentially goes out of the window because nobody can foresee every situation that you will encounter. You will have to adapt and adjust to it as you go along. But with autonomy also comes great responsibility. We are here to discuss particularly the contract between different generations. And that contract has been extremely important historically. If you look at old manufacturing towns today, one reason that they are not been able to transform very quickly is that many of the skills that people were taught in the mass production era don't apply in the same way today. What did you need in the mass production age? Well, you need punctuality, you need to be at work at time. You also needed conformism and obedience because you were doing repetitive assembly work over and over again. If you want to be an entrepreneur or an innovator, on the other hand, those skills are not necessarily that helpful. But as a good parent, what would you teach your children? In a manufacturing town, if you're going to work in a factory, obviously you want your children to succeed. Now, that doesn't mean that what we were told was irrelevant. A lot of the skills we learned, we should take on board. But we also know that there's only a certain amount that our parent teaches us from everything that we do know. We also get a lot of input from other people at work, at school, as we interact socially, and so on and so forth. And all of those interactions are based on one thing, and that is trust. And what we see, if we look at the data, is that high-trust societies are by far the most resilient societies in the world. They grow faster, they're more innovative, they have higher levels of well-being, and that makes sense, because in the end of the day, every transaction, every interaction is, to some extent at least, based on trust. You can't specify everything in a contract. So trust is absolutely critical, and trust between generations is just as critical.
That's powerful stuff. trust is, I was going to bring a different question to you. I was going to try and challenge some of what you said earlier. But this trust question that Carl has introduced is an interesting one. How do you develop trust, especially intergenerationally? Because, things might be working out much better here in Saudi, but there is globally, I think, the biggest challenge globally is the intergenerational conflict. You have, and I think you have people like Carl and many others at the World Economic Forum, experts that are constantly telling us the future of work is here. Remote working has to be more valued. You have to let people be. Gen Z doesn't want to be told what to do. They need to have freedom. And then you have people like me, and I think people like Abdulaziz, although I think he's better at this than I am, who are like, no, you have to come to work. You have to learn how to do repetitive, boring things. You can't just start from where you are and end up in the CXO office. You gotta work. So how do you bridge this gap? And can you do it without the trust that Carl is talking about?
Well, when I wrote The Trust Economy, the core premise is that trust is one of the most empowering things that we can basically use as that very bridge between generations and people from all around the world. That collaborative enablement is essential to why humans are successful and why we can build extraordinary things. Now, of course, in the recent times, we have also witnessed a disempowerment epidemic, which is exactly when trust is lost and when people feel like actually their abilities aren't enough. So a lot of this conversation is also around recognizing that each and every one of us has within themselves vast, precious, untapped abilities. And so this is why I'm firmly of the take that transformation begins within, and that the most successful outward transformation is actually an inward introspection. Is there going to be an instruction manual for that? No, but the very fun thing about this is, and the mesmerizing thing is, we all actually have that ability. We just don't know that we know certain things, and we didn't know that we could do certain things. And when we start basically with ourselves, trusting our own selves, empowering ourselves, that is the first step before we can be trusting of others, especially others that are different to us, that are older than us, that may be younger than us, that believe different things. And when we have that trust, upon that we can then build commonality, a simple purpose that we can all share, a contribution we all agree to, and then within ourselves we can find our own motivations and reasons for then, contributing and bringing our own part of that into the world.
I think, again, really powerful, and I see some of that. This afternoon we had a session with the 3 generations of the people working on the help center in Jeddah. There's fascinating levels of trust from grandmother to mother to daughter. That intergenerational trust is very visible there. The minister this morning, the deputy minister for tourism, she talked about her mother being in the audience, connecting with that generation. She talked about going to her father for that wisdom and guidance. Abdulaziz, this stuff gets sorted out at the macro level when you have good leadership and clarity of vision, which Naif also talked about. What about the role of behemoths, corporate behemoths like SABIC, in terms of helping drive this transformation? Maybe you have the social and the political stuff figured out, but what is the role of a big company like SABIC, especially from a human capital development perspective? Because we can get far with trust, but at the end of the day, we also need very specific skills in order to advance, especially in this age of technology where so much is going to be determined by our abilities and capabilities.
Yeah, definitely, purpose and trust really make up the fabric of an initiation of a transformation. But that's usually easier said than done. One of probably the best inventions that happened in the century is the creation of the organizational hierarchies. And when you think of entrepreneurs and how they start to organize themselves initially in a startup, there is no organizational hierarchy because they require agility, they require speed, movement, decision-making. As they grow, things get more complex. They wrap around it governance, policies, procedures, and what have you. Things get slower. For a transformation, it's kind of it's a manifestation of entrepreneurship, but maybe on a larger scale. And if I would use that analogy, then the organization hierarchy, as we have set it up in the past century, might not be the best solution to run transformations. So what would be the solution? What we've noticed, and we've piloted with this at SABIC, is that the strength of communities across the organization, value pockets, teams that are assembled around shared values and shared benefits and shared objectives have much more strength in terms of driving for change and driving for transformation. They have the agility, they have the speed, they don't necessarily fall into the organizational unit, maybe from an administration point of view, but a delivery context, they work within the community. We have, for example, the SABIC Young Leaders Council. It's a group of leaders nominated by the SABIC community that actually has its own governance and meets quarterly with the senior executives to discuss strategy and what's important, prioritization. We have communities for young SABIC professionals. We have a dedicated female network. And we've noticed that these communities actually mimic how the new generation establishes itself. It's around shared value, and it's much more stronger, it's quicker, it's agile, and focused.
Fantastic. So less kind of hierarchical structure and rigidity, and more investing in communities of practice and communities of change and kind of shared objectives. Naif, that sort of sets it up perfectly for the question I had for you, especially because you're at the Communication Space and Technology Commission, and I've mentioned this several times, the speed of change is quite, and the scale of it is quite fantastic. In any change process, anywhere in the world, throughout human history, there are winners and there are losers. And not to pick on the losers, but I think the losers are an important category, because if you're going to have communities in the way that Abdulaziz just mentioned, you need to be able to win over those that perceive that they're going to be losing because of this. How has that been managed? How have we built, or how has Saudi Arabia been able to build coalitions for change by bridging the gap between the winners and the losers?
Okay. Change is the norm today, so everyone is adapting to change. And specifically in the ICT sector, we are a bit lucky because the life cycle of technology is short when we compare it to different sectors. So 3G was a dream before several years, and everyone wants 5G right now. So we upgrade our infrastructure or digital infrastructure every 5 years if we compare it with different sectors. So we used to do this very quick. So in the last couple of years, we found that calibration is a key success for any transformation program. So calibration in the private sector with the government. Entrepreneurs are going very fast. So innovation also, life cycle become very short when we compare it to previous decades. Hence, government, policymaker, regulator need to quick adapt to that change. In case A, we decide to become a digital regulator. And the question here, what is a digital regulator? Is a regulator that work with the government agencies in a very close partnership. So before a while, we regulate the telco sector ourselves. But today, we cannot regulate drones alone. We need to regulate drones with the civil aviation authority. And this is go along with different technologies across different sectors.
Fantastic, Naif. Carl, I'm going to come to you as the fountain of wisdom. We don't have a lot of time left, but I hope you can summarize and answer this very simple question really quickly. You have, throughout the world, change agents and positive influences of change. And then you have these, we've solved that through collaboration and through communities here in Saudi Arabia, but there's always spoilers. And economic history is full of events in particular that actually go and collide into the positive energy in any given space or system. How do we, there was a little bit of talk about resilience, but how do we ingrain that resilience, especially amongst young people, not just in this country, but all over the world, to protect these systems of change, these processes of change, from those kind of destructive spoiler events in individuals?
Well, the short answer to that is that you need flexible institutions. So if you look at the post-war era, for example, the Soviet Union did pretty well. Eastern Europe did pretty well. The planned economies of the world did pretty well. And that's not that surprising, because the mass production era was an era where output could easily be monitored, where you're producing standardized goods, and hierarchical businesses, as well as hierarchical societies, managed to exploit economies of scope and scale very well. Along comes the computer revolution. What happens then is that essentially none of those economies really manage to adjust. The economy that manages to adjust is the United States, which after a period of also very significant centralization and corporatist institutions become much less hierarchical, much more decentralized, and therefore manages to adjust. Now, we are now at later stages of the computer revolution and at the onset of the AI revolution. And we're seeing a similar step change once again. So what's important to remember is that you never solve the problem. You constantly need to adjust, and you constantly need to move between centralized and decentralized structure. And if you fail those transitions, that's when stagnation happens.
I think that on that note, let's get a round of applause for this fantastic panel.